Have you ever been in this situation? Someone hurts you, maybe with a sharp comment, a betrayal, or even a cold silence. You feel it deeply. Your chest tightens. Your mind keeps replaying the moment. You wait for some recognition, an apology, a sign that they understand what they did. But instead, what happens? They act as if nothing ever happened. They smile, they joke, they move on with their day as if your pain doesn't even exist. And you're left wondering, how can they hurt me and then behave so innocently? This question isn't just a modern one. More than a century ago, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was already pointing directly at this very human paradox. Nietzsche was not afraid to describe people as they truly are, stripped of masks and illusions. He spoke about power, about morality, about resentment, and about how these forces shape our relationships. And if we listen carefully, his ideas help us understand why people cause pain without admitting it, and more importantly, what we can do about it. Let's start with Nietzsche's most central idea, the will to power. For Nietzsche, human beings are not driven mainly by survival or by the pursuit of happiness, as many might think. We are driven at the core by something deeper, the need to feel strong, to affirm ourselves, to influence the world around us. This is what he called the will to power. When someone hurts you and then refuses to acknowledge it, what are they really doing? They're exercising power. By ignoring your pain, they send an unspoken message. I decide what matters. I decide what is real. And your suffering? It doesn't count unless I say it does. Think about it. If they apologized, if they admitted they were wrong, what would that mean? It would mean lowering themselves, giving up some of that power. And for many people, that feels unbearable. It feels like weakness. So instead, they choose denial, silence, or even laughter, as if the wound they inflicted simply doesn't exist. Imagine a workplace situation. A colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Everyone applauds them, and you sit there stunned. Later, you expect at least some acknowledgement, maybe even a private, "Hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that." But instead, they casually chat with you about lunch plans as though nothing unusual happened. That behavior is not an accident. It's a demonstration of control. They know they wronged you, but by refusing to recognize it, they place you in a weaker position. You are left holding the weight of the injustice, while they walk free, untouched. Nietzsche would say, this is the will to power in action. And it's not always dramatic. It happens in subtle, everyday ways, in families, in friendships, in politics, even in love. And here's the hard truth. For the person who hurt you, your pain can actually become proof of their power. If you are upset, emotional, waiting for them to do the right thing, then in a strange way, they already won. They have shaped your emotional reality while keeping theirs untouched. Nietzsche believed that one of the most powerful ways to understand human behavior is to look at what he called master and slave morality. These aren't literal masters and slaves, but two very different ways of seeing the world, two mindsets that clash every time someone hurts you and then pretends they've done nothing wrong. So, what is master morality? It is the morality of the strong, of those who see themselves as creators of value. For them, good is whatever expresses their strength, their vitality, their independence. They don't measure their actions by how others feel about them. Instead, they set their own standards, their own rules. Slave morality is the opposite. It is the morality of those who feel powerless, who can't fight directly. Instead of creating their own values, they wait for recognition from others. They hope for fairness, for justice, for apology. They define good and evil not by strength, but by how actions affect them personally. Now think about the dynamic when someone wrongs you and then acts innocent. In that moment, they are often living in the master morality. I decide what matters. If I don't acknowledge your pain, then it isn't real. For them, ignoring the harm is a way of reinforcing control, of showing they can define reality itself. And what about you? If you're waiting for an apology, replaying the scene, wishing they would just admit it, you've been drawn into slave morality. You're relying on their recognition to feel whole again. Your emotional state depends on whether they give you that small piece of validation. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a relationship where one partner constantly makes cutting remarks. "You'll never succeed," or "Why do you always fail?" Afterward, they might buy flowers, crack a joke, or act sweet as if nothing happened. If you accept this without question, you're playing by their rules. You're waiting for them to define when harm counts and when it doesn't. That's slave morality in action. We can see this on a larger scale too. In politics, powerful nations often act in ways that damage smaller ones, economically, militarily, or diplomatically. And when called out, they often respond with denial. "We didn't do anything wrong." You misunderstood. That's master morality on the world stage. The weaker nations, meanwhile, may cry out for justice, but justice comes only if the powerful decide to grant it. Nietzsche's point isn't that one morality is good and the other is bad. It's that they create tension. And unless we become aware of this dynamic, we remain stuck in the role of the powerless, waiting endlessly for recognition that will never come. Here's the challenge Nietzsche gives us. Stop expecting those who hurt you to validate your pain. They won't. In their world, they don't need to. The question is, are you willing to stop waiting and instead create your own strength, your own values, independent of their approval? There's a particular kind of poison that slowly eats away at us when someone hurts us and then denies it. Nietzsche gave it a name: ressentiment. Not just resentment in the everyday sense, but a deep, corrosive reaction of the powerless against the powerful. Ressentiment begins when you're harmed but cannot strike back. Instead of confronting, you swallow the pain. You replay the scene over and over in your head. You dream of justice, of apologies, of the other person finally realizing what they've done. But because you feel you can't act directly, the emotion stays trapped. It festers. And with time, it begins to define you. Picture this. You have a friend who constantly cancels plans at the last minute. Every time you feel slighted, unimportant. But instead of telling them clearly, "This hurts me," you smile and say, "It's okay, maybe next time." Inside, though, you're boiling. The frustration doesn't go away. It accumulates. That's ressentiment. Or think about the colleague who always shows up late to meetings, wasting everyone's time. You hate it. You gossip about it with others. You make sarcastic remarks under your breath. But you never say it directly. Once again, the resentment is stored rather than released. Nietzsche saw ressentiment as the breeding ground of slave morality. Those who cannot act directly, who cannot assert their will to power, instead reshape morality in their minds. They start saying, "The strong are evil. The ones who hurt me are wicked. My weakness, my patience, my suffering, that is what makes me good." It's a reversal of values, born out of impotence. We can even see ressentiment in history. The collapse of the Roman Empire, for example, wasn't caused by one great battle. It was the long buildup of resentment among oppressed groups who couldn't fight Rome head-on. Over generations, this silent hatred grew into a force that eventually toppled one of the greatest powers in history. In modern life, ressentiment shows up in quieter ways. Entire workplaces can become poisoned by it. Employees endure toxic managers but never speak out. Instead, they disengage. They sabotage in small, invisible ways. They withdraw effort. On the surface, everything looks stable, but underneath, the culture rots. The tragedy of ressentiment is that it doesn't hurt the offender. It hurts you. The person who wronged you may sleep soundly at night, while you're the one awake, replaying conversations, waiting for apologies that will never come. The poison doesn't stay in them. It grows in you. Nietzsche's warning is clear. Ressentiment keeps you chained. It disguises itself as moral superiority, as patience, as virtue, but in reality, it prevents transformation. So when you feel that familiar burning anger rise up, ask yourself, am I using this pain to grow stronger, or am I letting it calcify into resentment? Because if it's the latter, the person who hurt you is still controlling you, long after the moment has passed. Nietzsche famously wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." At first glance, this sounds poetic, even mystical, but beneath the poetry lies a stark truth. Without struggle, without disorder, there is no transformation. Greatness is not born out of comfort, but out of conflict. Think about the moments in your own life when you felt most alive, most real. Were they the times when everything was easy? Or were they the times when you were thrown into difficulty, when something inside you had to rise to meet the challenge? Perhaps you moved to a new country, learned a language from scratch, or started a job you weren't sure you could handle. The anxiety, the late nights, the mistakes, they all forged you into someone different, stronger, sharper. History is filled with lives that confirm this principle. Take Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in prison, robbed of freedom, isolated from the world. Many would have broken. Yet Mandela emerged not bitter, but greater. His suffering transformed into strength, his chaos into a vision for a nation. This was not comfort. This was struggle turned into creation. Or consider the world of art. Vincent van Gogh lived a life of torment, poverty, rejection, mental illness. He never tasted success while alive, but through his suffering, he painted with a passion and intensity that reshaped the very language of art. His chaos birthed stars on canvas that still shine today. Nietzsche insists that the individual who flees from hardship flees from their own becoming. He warns us against the narcotic comforts of mediocrity, conformity, shallow entertainment, blind obedience. These are the forces that lull us into sleepwalking through life. Struggle, in contrast, is the alarm clock. It wakes us up, forces us to see who we are. But this is not about romanticizing pain for its own sake. Nietzsche is clear. Suffering without transformation is just despair. The challenge is to use the struggle, to turn wounds into weapons, obstacles into stepping stones. The chaos within you must be shaped, disciplined, and directed until it gives birth to something radiant. And this principle is not limited to heroes or artists. It is available to you here and now. The difficult project you're avoiding, the personal fear you haven't confronted, the truth you don't want to face, these are your raw materials. These are your flames. Nietzsche would tell you, walk into them, for in those flames, the old self burns away, and the possibility of the dancing star is born. For Nietzsche, the struggle is not an end in itself. The storms of life are not meant to crush us, but to refine us. Out of the fire comes not destruction, but transformation. And this transformation is captured in one of Nietzsche's most misunderstood ideas, the Übermensch, often translated as the overman or the higher self. The Übermensch is not a comic book superhero. It is not about power over others, but power over oneself. To Nietzsche, this figure represents the human being who dares to create their own values, who refuses to be enslaved by tradition, by fear, by the demand to fit neatly into society's mold. The Übermensch is one who has looked at the chaos of life, embraced it fully, and reshaped it into something luminous. Think of it this way. Most people live by borrowed scripts. They inherit beliefs from parents, repeat slogans from culture, and obey expectations that they never chose. Nietzsche challenges us. What would it mean to write your own script, to decide truly what is meaningful to you, and to live by it, even if the world does not understand? Consider Steve Jobs. He He famously said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." Jobs dropped out of college, followed his curiosity in design and technology, and built Apple by blending art and engineering in a way no one else imagined. He defied convention, embraced failures, and created a company that changed how billions interact with technology. This is a glimpse of what Nietzsche meant, not blind rebellion, but creation. Or take Malala Yousafzai. As a teenager in Pakistan, she faced violence for demanding the right of girls to be educated. Even after surviving an assassination attempt, she chose not bitterness, but courage. Her struggle became the foundation for global change, earning her the Nobel Peace Prize. She turned personal chaos into universal light. Nietzsche's message is radical. Stop waiting for someone else to hand you meaning. Stop living according to rules written by the past. Instead, become the author of your own destiny. This does not mean rejecting all traditions blindly, but weighing them, questioning them, and choosing only what aligns with the deepest pulse of your being. This path is demanding. It requires honesty with yourself, the courage to stand apart, and the strength to endure misunderstanding. But it is also liberating. For when you cease to live by borrowed values, when you embrace the task of becoming, you no longer chase a shallow happiness. You forge a deeper joy, not the comfort of avoiding struggle, but the exhilaration of transforming it. Nietzsche would say, "This is the dance of the overman. To live as if life itself were a work of art you are shaping each day." Nietzsche's philosophy is not only about grand visions, it is also about the discipline of daily life. The path of becoming, the creation of one's higher self, cannot happen in a single dramatic moment. It is forged slowly through choices repeated day after day. This is why Nietzsche emphasizes responsibility. Not responsibility in the sense of obeying external rules, but responsibility for one's own existence. Every choice you make is a brushstroke on the canvas of your life. And unlike borrowed scripts or social expectations, these choices are yours alone. To take responsibility is to admit, I am the author, not a victim. If my life feels small, it is because I have chosen smallness. If I want greatness, I must choose it daily. Consider the Stoics, whom Nietzsche admired and critiqued in equal measure. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, wrote in his journal every morning and night, reminding himself of the duty to live with virtue despite endless pressures. He carried the weight of an empire, but never allowed that weight to excuse him from shaping his own mind. His meditations are not philosophy for others. They are reminders to himself to live consciously. That daily practice is what kept him aligned with his values. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on habit formation show that identity is built through repetition. If you want to see yourself as strong, disciplined, or creative, you cannot wait for a moment of inspiration. You must act in small ways each day, writing a page, lifting a weight, resisting a distraction. Slowly, the actions become the person. This is Nietzsche's insight translated into science. Daily practice transforms chaos into order. Take Serena Williams. Her legendary career was not shaped by talent alone, but by relentless practice, thousands of hours spent perfecting each stroke. Her triumphs on the court are visible, but the invisible discipline behind them is what made her extraordinary. She carried responsibility for her craft in every practice session, long before the world applauded, or looked closer to ordinary life. Imagine someone who decides to confront their fear of speaking up in meetings. At first, their voice trembles, words stumble, and discomfort feels overwhelming. But each week, they push a little more, asking a question, offering a thought, volunteering for a small presentation. Over time, what was once chaos becomes confidence. Their world expands, not because society granted them permission, but because they took responsibility for their growth. Nietzsche would urge us, do not wait for comfort, permission, or guarantees. Begin with small acts of responsibility. Confront the thing you most fear, step by step. Each act, however small, is a seed of transformation. The overman is not born in a single heroic gesture. It is born in the discipline of daily practice, in the responsibility of shaping yourself again and again, until one day you look back and realize that you have become someone entirely new. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Rumi, you've walked through the maze now. You've seen the tricks of the ego, the weaponized innocence, the subtle manipulations that leave you doubting your memory, questioning your worth, apologizing for pain you didn't cause, and maybe, for the first time, something inside you isn't just understanding, it's unlearning. That is not weakness. That is not bitterness. That is the beginning of clarity, because healing does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, I know what happened. I see it now, and I will no longer let the guilt of the abuser masquerade as my burden to carry. You don't have to prove your pain anymore. You don't have to educate the one who pretends not to know. You don't have to make peace with a distorted story just to preserve a false harmony. You are not cruel for walking away. You are not cold for protecting your peace. You are not heartless for finally honoring the war that was waged silently on your nervous system for years. There is a strength in no longer needing their validation. There is a sacredness in no longer performing your forgiveness. There is a quiet power in closing the door, not with vengeance, but with reverence for the self who endured. So let this be your turning point. Not a scream, not a fight, but a stillness that says, I know the truth now, and I am free. If you're tired of shrinking, of being polite at the cost of your truth, let this be the first step. Comment with, I choose sacred boundaries, and subscribe for more depth-driven insights every day.